Delighted to have you with Content Evolution NuWorld today. And our guest is Tim Beharin. Uh, Tim is a luminary in the tech world, providing advice as a futurist, as a consultant, as an advisor. Tim and I go way back because he was a member, among other industry advisory councils for a variety of manufacturers, and part of the ThinkPad Advisory Council. And Tim, I think you're still advising Lenovo today, right?
Still on the council.
There you go.
I'm
So uh, we're delighted to have you with us. When my co-host Mike McGuire joins, he'll join in the conversation. But today we're going to talk about the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference that took place on Monday. I shared Tim's Forbes article with all of you, but we're looking forward to hearing from you, Tim, and having a robust conversation about implications of what Apple disclosed, announced, and shared with us on Monday. Tim, over to you.
Yeah, I'm in a unique position as I've been an advisor to Apple since the mid 80s and I spent a lot of time with every one of their CEOs over the years. And as a result, I've developed a pretty deep relationship with them, which I'm one of the few that get briefed before the event.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a chance to actually have deep discussions with most of the key leadership who actually created the AI architecture and built all of the fundamental design. Shortly, I will post let me just double check here, the titles. I will post Apple's on-device server foundation models and the private cloud compute models that are used to build this underlying architecture. It's a little bit techy, but if you have an interest in digging deeper, it shows you what they've done and how they've built out the architecture to create this next generation of AI integration. Now, what Apple introduced is in the context of the WWDC was actually a lot of different things. They talked about updates to iOS. They talked to iOS 18 or iPhone iOS 18. Same with the iPad, and then the Mac. How the Mac will integrate AI, and their new version of Mac OS called Sequoia that will launch. All of these will technically launch in the fall, although the betas for all of them are starting to, well, actually should be released, if not today, tomorrow. So you can start playing with it. Although I would suggest you not upload the betas at this point. They're not, the friends of mine who have done it says it's just not that stable. I'd wait a couple of weeks before, if you were going to actually want to test some of this stuff, a little bit longer before you update to iOS 18 or even the Sequoia beta won't be when it comes out, I think in about a month from now. Anyway, the bottom line is that Apple has done a very unique approach to integration of artificial intelligence. I would like to point out, though, that Apple's not new to AI. If you remember back in 1986, Apple introduced a product called the Knowledge Navigator. It was a fascinating view of how Apple saw the future of interaction with video and content and queries, etc. And they showed AI features in Knowledge Navigator, and that was 86. In 1992, I had the privilege of sitting down with a guy who is now one of the leading authorities in AI, a guy by the name of Kai-Fu Lee, who joined Apple in 1991 to begin building out Apple's artificial intelligence architecture for Newton. And he had laid the groundwork for an expansive AI AI building blocks as early as 1992. Unfortunately, he was so good, he got ripped off by Microsoft and eventually became head of all of Microsoft's China business. He's written 2 books on it, and again, an amazing source uh, that just emphasizes that Apple is not new to AI. On the other hand, the Apple officials told me that Apple really expanded what they were starting to do with artificial intelligence around 2007. And at that time, they began building a bunch of various layers to expand how they would use artificial intelligence, not as a one-off, but integrated into all the products across all operating systems. So even the work that they are displaying today, this last week, has its roots back to as early as 2006, 2007. What Apple did show us, and it was really quite impressive, was how they actually are using AI in so many different applications and functions. And why that's important is, again, Apple didn't just hold on, just let me see something here. Get my notes. Apple didn't just look at the idea of partnering, for example, with ChatGPT or any of the major generative AI engines. They had a very distinct, unique approach to it. So what you're seeing from Apple now is just a very deep integration of AI so that each function can be very different. Now, if you look at my column that I wrote yesterday, I brought up, for example, all the various things you could do. So, for example, as a personal assistant, it uses natural language processing to understand and respond to user queries, set reminders, send message, and play music. And more importantly, it's contextual aware. Before I go into other things it can do, let me just point out one important perspective. What Apple's doing is taking your data, your information, and inferencing it. And in a way, it's part of a closed search of your only personal data. And this is very unique in the industry at the moment because, as you know, generative AI is a world approach to data. It's bringing in information from everything. What Apple's doing is bringing only, in this particular case, it's applying artificial intelligence to just your personal information. And we call it small language models. Instead of a large language model, it's a small language model based on just your content. That's really important because if you've been an Apple user, especially for a long time, you've built an incredible database of information of how you work, who your friends are, who your connections are, what you've said in the past, what they can draw from to actually do these new types of functions and features. That's why when it works as a personal assistant, it can uh, uh, go back and look at your messages, bring them forward, suggest what you do with it, etc. In the Photos app, it uses AI to identify and categorize people, objects, and scenes within photos, enabling features like memories and improved search. Photo editing is really cool. They have AI-powered tools like auto enhance, smart cropping, and adjustments to improve quality. And that's all built in to just the Photo app now. In the Mail app, it has smart filters and detection. It filters spam and junk mail, detects important messages. And they showed a lot of interesting new things within the context of the Mail app because not just having filters and detections, it also can automatically determine, you know, what your what the apps what the messages are. For example, if the messages are promotions, it can separate it into just promotion category. If it's direct message emails to you with content related to you, it'll just put out that as a dedicated section. Anyway, it then offers predictive typing and suggested replies. And when it really, once it does come out, it gives you all various ways to expand what you wrote. So whatever you wrote, it can give you, say, in business style, in more conversational, etc., and then translate that through AI to a better written email. In Apple Music, it allows for personalized recommendations. It curates your playlist and suggests music based on listening habits, preferences, and trends. And they showed us this behind the scene. They showed us some really great um, functionality that understands natural language and offers relevant results on all of your music. One of the better features was AI optimization in Apple Maps for navigational routes, provides real-time traffic updates, and suggests alternate routes. In a sense, they are creating their own version of Waze, and they're doing it as a part of the overall integration. And it uses AI to recommend nearby locations based on user preferences and past behavior. In the Apple News feed, which I go to a lot, I use a lot, it adds more personalization in the news feed, and it curates news stories and topics based on user interests and reading history. And then it suggests articles and sources that align with user preferences. And then, of course, Apple's big on health. They look at activating AI to analyze data from sensors and third-party devices to provide insights into fitness, sleep patterns, and overall health. And that's kind of interesting too, because again, I have an Apple Watch, I have a smart ring, I have a continuous glucose sensor for my diabetes. So I have all of these sensors that feed me data individually. This will take all of that data and put it into my health thing and give me an analysis of what my health features were that particular day. And then it also was kind of interesting, but it actually will identify long-term health trends and offer personalized health recommendations. So as you can see, Apple has done a great deal to make the integration very, very interesting, so that it's culling my personal data, both forward, backward, and going forward, creating a repository of my information, and then using the artificial intelligence to go in to use that to make me even more productive. Then they announced, of course, the relationship with OpenAI. And that's a real interesting relationship for two reasons. Number one, Apple actually got that for free. And two, they're using it as an addendum to Siri. So for example, when you are using Siri, you can say to Siri, you know, what's my calendar for today? Or you could say, Siri, I had a discussion with Kevin or Mark or Mike. We talked about another meeting in 3 days.
I don't understand.
Hold on. Siri's responding to me in the background. Love that when I have.
Looks like you were
No,
getting a
we've had-
fax there, even because of your virtual background.
Yeah, I love when Siri's around and it's
There you
dominating my office. Anyway, but I could say, Mike and Kevin and I talked about a meeting in a couple of days, put that on my calendar. And without me having to go in and do it myself, it just pops up on my calendar. Anyway, a lot of great new features, a lot of fun things. And I'm sure you read tons about it. But from a first person perspective, like I said, I got to see it in advance. I was at the event. I got to talk to a lot of the officials at the event itself. And then we had a meeting at the end with Craig Federighi, who is the head of software. And he reiterated some of the things that I'm going to post in the chat shortly, because all of this is based on their foundational models that they built over the last 7 years. And what really kind of struck me is the deep integration that Apple has developed here. Now, going back to the OpenAI relationship, Apple did say that they would potentially look at other engines in the future, but they cut the first one with OpenAI. Now, again, on the surface, it looks like a really good deal for Apple since they got it for free. But you can imagine that OpenAI didn't go into this as a freebie without wanting something from them. And the reason they did the deal is because now they have the opportunity to have access to over 1 billion Apple users that they can upsell the OpenAI services, which is about $20 a month. So they now have got a huge audience to go after. So two things happened right after the event. Number one, Apple stock went bananas and topped that 3 trillion mark at a new level and leapfrogged NVIDIA and others. But OpenAI stock went up too, because once the financial analysts understood that OpenAI was now going to have access to Apple's customers, and they'll have a huge lead on a potential Google or anybody else's. And by the way, that's the reason Elon Musk went bananas, because he's doing a competitive thing and he would like the same deal himself from Apple in the future. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling, but I'm open to questions. And Mike, of course, I want you to pipe in as well. And while you share a little bit, I'm going to pop up those things in the chat area.
We're delighted to have Mike McGuire as our other subject matter expert, because he listened very intently on Monday. Mike?
Thanks, Kevin. Tim, thanks. That was great overview. And I, did listen in. I apologize. I did confront an issue trying to join the meeting earlier. And I will say, as part of my response and insight about the announcement, I'm going to have to upgrade my Mac pretty quickly if I'm going to take advantage of any of this stuff, because it's clear you'll really will need the at least, what was it, M2 or later, I think, is what any of this, when it's integrated, will run on. And I think I have the last generation of the Intel chip versions. I think, this is both a question, both a statement and a kind of a question to the group and to Tim. Part of this is what I found also interesting, Tim, within the last 2 versions of iOS, some of that connection between taking Siri from what it's always been, which is, yes, I can open a calendar and set a reminder for you. No, I can't go look in email for that email thread between you, Tim, and Kevin and me about the subject that now you can't. If you noticed in the last couple of months, Siri's actually become a lot more enabled. And I think they were actually kind of getting it ready for this integration, because it has become a little more capable. But Tim, I mean, what was it about the technology that took Apple to this point? Because about last year, at the end of last year, when they introduced the Vision Pro, right, there was some kind of back and forth in the press running in the run up before that announcement, right, that, or it was going to be, AI, truly AI enabled Siri was going to be upgraded, et cetera, at that time frame. And I thought that was going to be the big deal. Wrote a snarky piece saying, geez, I wanted a smarter Siri and all I got was a Vision Pro. I'm wondering, what was it, Tim, that do you think, without any trade secrets or anything, what was it that took the amount of time it's taken for Siri to get smarter?
Well, a couple of reasons, because first of all, the underlying architecture that was behind Siri was purchased by another company. And while Apple was able to expand on it over the years, and again, Siri's been out in the market for almost 10 years, you would have expected that Apple would have done more. But if you look at the two links I just pointed out, it took them building out those two layers of
All right.
of the um, of the Apple's on-device foundation models and the
Oh, and the private cloud
computing.
security stuff.
Yeah, in order to make it work. And that really only came to reality in the last 3 years, where they put so much emphasis on it. And one of the things that actually came out in our discussion is Apple going to create their own version of a dedicated server architecture behind this to host this. Apple wouldn't say anything about that, but it did take them much longer than others. They like I said, they always had the fundamentals there, but they had to build their own models. And one of the things that Apple was worried about, and this again is really important, even on the OpenAI Chat GPT model, is that they got OpenAI to agree not to log individuals' queries.
Right.
And so Apple's really serious about privacy. And Apple, reiterated to me personally, kept saying, we have no idea what you're saying, what you're doing. It's all in the background. So your privacy is constantly protected. And, for that matter, that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, sure. And I think that's part of the AI deal, right? Is besides the access, because I would say probably a large part of the initial and current OpenAI Chat GPT user base is probably doing on a Mac or an iPhone. I think a lot of it was the more subtle message I saw there was OpenAI, I think, is hoping to get a little bit of that glow, right, from Apple's longstanding on privacy to kind of inherit some of that. Hey, that this is the new halo effect. See, our AI is good, even Apple uses it. But I think that to me, that really is what that explanation about having to get the security architecture and this notion of a private cloud when so much of the other systems are based on extracting your data and exchanges, your queries, et cetera, and then uploading them and training the larger set on that.
Yeah.
I think that's, had to have been a lot harder. It's obviously was harder than a simpleton like me thought. Richard, I can see you were agitated, raising your hand. Go.
Well, I'm just saying, in my 15 years of experience using these systems to, digest a whole lot of data, what we learned is, for example, I'll give you a quick example. We took a whole bunch of Nielsen data once, and they gave it to us as a big flat file, and we ran it through our machine learning process. Even though I don't have at the end that personalized information that, Mike McGuire went into a Winn-Dixie store and bought, chicken nuggets or whatever it was, that doesn't matter nearly as much as the fact that I now have this pattern of life compressed
Right.
or a metadata set that is extraordinarily valuable. So yeah, I don't need your data, but I still have created an enormous amount of value from what I've pulled. And there's still some questions about, like, did I create that value at, did I reward those people I took that information from, or did I just take it from them and now I'm exploiting it and doing extraordinary things, but I'm not paying anybody else for it? That's one of the central issues we're dealing with these techniques.
No, I
So
agree.
I just want to make that point.
That's fascinating, Richard. I mean, to me, again, with this corpus now that Apple's assembled, as Tim was describing, over the last 25 years of usage, right? We've been working on building these, digital twins at Ultisim, but to your point about rewarding and engagement with users, honestly, if I'm a research firm, I need to go talk to probably choice flows, right? To rethink how I engage, with this, because now, theoretically, right, is that, as Tim talked about, this training and understanding of patterns of users over decades. I now write a pretty good profile of Mike McGuire as far as Apple's concerned, right? They've got payments
Think
for
about
me.
the
They have
location
media.
services, right? Where you go every single day. That pattern of life is really deep and revealing about who people really are and what they
And,
do, more so than any survey you could ever use.
and I think Apple could help us all make a little extra money, right? Because once they have that profile, I might be willing to go to a bigger brand, right? Or one of the ad networks, say, you can get a snapshot of my profile every quarter. And all you got to do is, and Apple's already measured the changes, right? I moved. I got another car. I sold my house and moved into a van, and lived the van life. That's all going to be there. And now I have this centralized place where I can extract an image of that image of me and say, here you go, advertisers, what's it worth to you? Right? You want my profile? You want to know what I'm into right now? Here you go. And how much? Maybe it's not money, could be a discount, etc. But I think Tim, I don't know if this was in the architecture update. As Siri gets smarter, all of a sudden the Vision Pro or whatever the next generation of that hardware, you know, there's the spatial computing concept. But now that I have this Siri that can do what Kevin and some customers I worked that did a presentation for about 6 years ago, wasn't it, Kevin? 6 or 7 years ago, a whole thing about where gestures and voice, control was going to be no more keyboards. You won't need it. You'll have conversations, which is almost pretty close to what we saw there. And I wonder what we see with the future of Vision Pro, when now I do have this ability to engage in a very indirect way, if you will, with whether it's an iPhone or Siri or whatever. It's going to be a lot of reasons to, but not compulsive reasons to always look at my screen. Right. I think that the demo that got me, Tim, was where one of the product folks was talking about being in a public situation and a private situation and wanting to add notes, right, or to create that event where you could all of a sudden just like with a gesture on the device go into message mode where you're using the keyboard.
Yeah.
That's a subtle thing, but that was kind of actually what I expected the first generation of Siri to be able to do, but clearly I didn't understand how hard that was.
Well, I think that what'll happen once people start using some of these features, they're going to, one, be amazed, but two, they're going to see how it changes how you work and even potentially how you play. By the way, just one point on this, Apple is not introducing any of these features in Vision Pro at the moment. We asked them that question because it didn't come up in any discussion, and they said this is something that will be discussed later on. And then they introduced Vision Kit version 2 anyway, at the event, which had some pretty good updates in it. But this particular event was focused for the developers and to get them creating and integrating on their main platforms as opposed to Vision OS. They did have special sessions for the developers just on Vision OS 2, which they were going to disclose a bunch of new stuff to them, but they wouldn't disclose it to us publicly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there an inference that that platform and the current technology that's available just isn't ready, that it isn't ready to embrace all the modalities, right? That Vision Pro, has, that the developers are working in? Would that be a good inference to make, Tim?
No, I mean, fundamentally, it's all there because it already has their neural processors and everything else. I think it had more to do with being the developer conference where the focus was really on iOS and Mac OS and iPad OS.
Okay,
and,
I hear you.
And I do think you're going to see commentary on that from Apple maybe in the fall. we are not aware of them introducing a new version of Vision Pro yet this year. That most likely will happen next spring at the earliest. And I don't know if you saw, but they also announced that it's going to go to like the UK and
Right. 10
what
or
kind of
15 new
12
countries, I think.
10 or 12 other countries. And once it goes there, you're going to probably see a lot of interaction of what's going on. Next week, I'm going to be at Augmented World Expo, where I'm doing a main stage panel with some of the headset makers, including Qualcomm's guy that does Qualcomm's chipsets, Meta, Lenovo, and Varjo. And I'm actually going to bring up this whole issue of where we're going to go with headsets, what's going to happen next. Because now that Apple has introduced the Vision Pro, we're actually seeing an incredible amount of activity of trying to, from the ground up, move into what Apple's territory is. Quest 3, which is going to be introduced, I think, next week or the week after, is already showing signs of things that Apple are doing in spatial. And but anyway, I'm going to drive the panel to kind of give me more feedback on that, and I'll probably write about that after the panel.
Good. Doug Hoolan has joined us. He's been posting ferociously in chat. He's always a good sharer. Doug, you're on mute. Join us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I posted about this analysis of shipment of on-device AI chipsets.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, that, I've seen some confusion in the industry. First of all, is with Apple, this Apple Intelligence is compatible with these devices, right? So, what Apple said from an iPhone perspective is the Pro Max, the 15 Pro Max and the 15 Pro, right? Yeah. And so, someone said, well, I think that the earlier phones may have this function, Apple Intelligence in it as well. But, there's, I guess one question was, first of all, is that the case? The second question I would have is,
Doug, let's stop on that for a second. Technically, this has to have the most advanced neural processor that only comes with the M1, M2, and in the one A17 that's in the Mac iPhone Pros. But what you point out in your commentaries is really important, and I was going to bring this up because in theory, the AI PC guys are doing the exact same thing with the PC. Because in the same case there, they all have to, the AI PC has to, as you point out, the new XL Elite chip from Qualcomm, and they're going to need the actual new chips from Intel and AMD to be called an AI PC, because you need the power of these neural processing engines to handle the underlying query amounts or the AI content going forward. But in Apple's case, and by the way, this also, to be honest with you, is one of the most exciting things for both smartphone guys and the PC guys, because the PC guys expect to have a major new refresh going forward. Because if you want all of these features, you got to buy a new PC.
Exactly.
In Apple's case, if you want all these features, you're going to have to buy a new Apple iPhone or a new iPad. So in that context, we are going to see an inflection point from an industry standpoint, in an industry point, where we are going to see a huge shift in demand for PCs and smartphones. The big thing that with Apple that makes this differently is that Apple integrates this from the inside,
Right.
so that it's tracking, it's already taking data from what you've done as well as what you continue to do. With the AI PC, it only starts tracking you from the time you start using the AI PC. So it cannot get any information from your past. So contextually, it has no idea of who you are, what you do, etc., and will only start building that context once you start recording your daily activities going forward. But even then, the AI PC is gonna be, especially once you start using it over time, you'll build up your own small language model
Yep.
and it'll become even better. So 2 years from now, you've built up a repository of great information. It'll be very similar.
Right,
So
Tim,
Tim-
wouldn't you expect that that would be something Apple's kind of enterprise services group might start wanting to be selling at some point, right? Which is, hey, Amex, you want to train your corpus, build your own large language model for your employees. Yeah, here you go. Here's part of
Well,
that's part of
yes and no. I've had a discussion with enterprises on this right now and companies. To do that, they really have to put the investment in creating their own AI server farms.
and a schema,
Yeah.
the restructuring data,
Well,
metadata, etc.
yeah, and in that context, you're gonna go in and have to buy some of the new A300 NVIDIA
Right.
chipsets and others. So a lot of these guys are basically looking at, and they are going to existing server farms that have the equivalent neural processors to do this. But if I was American Express or one of these guys as well, I'd eventually want to do that because I want to control the privacy feature
Correct.
on my systems. I don't want it on AWS or whoever else is doing it. But
Do you?
yeah,
Can I ask one more question, Tim? We got a lot more time. This, as they were describing it, adding the upgrades to Siri, within their Apple Intelligence, they alluded to it a few lines of code, right? Which is Apple's, and typically they're right. Of course, there are issues that with any integration, sometimes it's more painful. One of the things I know that like the last few years at my previous employers where I was kind of overseeing a lot of the mobile and mobile marketing stuff is I was constantly speaking with end users who had very popular apps, end user companies, that is. I was like, why haven't you integrated Siri voice commands into your application? And they never said, sorry. Oh shit. Sorry. Get out of here. Where was I? Oh, they were saying, I would talk, why aren't you, enabling your app for Siri command and control, etc. And it wasn't because it was hard or we'd have to recode the app. It was nobody wants it. And I'm wondering, I got a sense that they've refined that integration of Siri into applications, but is it now going to be not so much that it's a technical hurdle? Now there's just a really appealing and important set of capabilities you want to have.
Yeah, but in that it's seamless. I mean, the Siri kit has always been availability to developers who could add Siri to their applications. It's just that, at the application level, depending on how rich the application was, it just didn't work well. Where with Apple, the way Apple's done it, it's seamless. And so, and that makes a big difference in how it's going to work.
But I think now that there is a very attractive reason for people, even though it's easy, it's easier, but now there's a real set of use cases like we really need to enable our app with this.
Yeah.
Mark's got his hand up. Mark.
Yeah, and you have a follow-up call from Doug eventually, right? Because there were two questions he wanted.
Oh yeah, let's go back to Doug just for
just 1 second, Mark.
You, Doug.
I'll take my time. Take your time.
Yeah, so I put a link in. The key question is, and I saw some of the architecture where you have local on the device. In fact, they talk about powerful, intuitive, integrated, personal, and private Apple. And then also having the ability to go to the private server, right, in the cloud. So that's Apple's strategy. And then you have a Google Android strategy. I personally, I think in the next 5 years, everyone's going to have a personal AI. It's going to be coming through the smartphone. So who do you think is going to win between Apple and Android?
Well, Apple's going to have a huge advantage in this thing because, hold on. Siri was answering your question.
And mine too. We got to get south that.
Mute, Siri.
Apple has a huge advantage on this because they own the hardware, software, and the services element of it. From a Google standpoint and Android, they argued, by the way, some of these features were already in Android, but they were there as piecemeal.
Correct.
I point that out in my column. What I think is going to happen is Apple is going to show the industry how best to do this, as they have in the past, and the rest of the industry will be constantly playing catch up. Now, having said that, Google is really, I mean, Google does Pixel, right? They have their own smartphones. So in theory, what Google may do is they may put Gemini inside of the Pixel architecture to try to make the Pixel more attractive as an AI phone going forward. But it's, you know, it's hard to say if you talk about winners per se, in that, you know, the chat GPTs and the Geminis and all these others are all going to play an important role. It's that they're going to play a global role, whereas Apple, and actually my column that I wrote is, for Apple, AI is personal. Apple does a greater job at creating personal connections through AI for me. And you can't, that's why people were saying, you know, Apple should have done their own chat GPT. No, there's no reason for them to invent the engine. What they did was the exact perfect way to do it, leverage these other engines at no cost to them, by the way, as opposed to spending $10-12 billion on their own you know, back-end architecture to create their own version of an LLM server. So, Doug, in that sense, I think Apple's going to have the largest lead on this for at least for 2 years. I think Google will do some things that'll start catching up. But at the same time, I think the competitive juices are now going to be flowing for all of these guys, and they're going to try to figure out a way to, at the very least, stay competitive with Apple.
Agreed.
Okay,
No, what's that?
Go ahead, Mike.
I couldn't hear you. You were cutting out.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh no, I think it's Mark's turn.
Hey, everybody. So thank you for all this stuff. I listened to the second half of the keynote. I got distracted, missed the first half. And I left being a little disappointed. And the reason I did, the thing that I've always liked about Apple is that what they came up with was a vision of what you could do with this stuff. And I didn't get that. I got the sense that it makes us more productive and it integrates all these things and it lets us go to ChatGPT and it lets us do this. And I want all those things. But what I missed from this is a sense of, okay, now we can do this. Now when we have ChatGPT, we have image generation, we have all these kinds of things. What can we actually do? And the examples that they showed, like you can make a little bit better memories. I was very surprised that there was less vision and more nuts and bolts in this kind of stuff.
Well,
I think that's always been a difference, I think, in the last 25 years in my observations, Mark, of Apple and how they roll things out. What you're describing with vision is 5 years from now, you'll be able to create an entire, whatever, three-dimensional, you know, your version of the Last Supper, your version of whatever piece of art. They don't like to frame that future too far out. They've always, in the last 25 years, in the way they're positioning, my interpretation of messaging is, what can you do with it now? When you get this in whatever the end of the year, or whenever you shell out some money for a new, you know, Mac, they want you to be able to see what you can do now. I would argue the Knowledge Navigator was the last like vision thing Apple ever put out, as far as like a marketing message or a thing about what the capability, the future, if you will. Tim may disagree, but to me, they've always been about not what you're going to be able to do 5 years from now or even 2 years, but when you get this and open it up and fire it up, this is what you can do now.
Mark,
yeah,
Mark, the real reason has to do with how much time it would take to do that in the keynote. Apple has to streamline this down to, in this time, it was an hour and 37
Yeah.
minutes. Normally it's, they always do two hours. Now, have you read my column yet in Forbes?
I have not, but I wish I will get to it as soon as we finish.
I list all of the different things there that Apple
Okay.
has said it can do. Or the fun, I think I listed 10 things. There's hundreds of things that it can do. Apple just didn't have time to state it. And I agree. I was very disappointed, the same thing. Even in my briefing, we only touched 7 or 8 different pieces like the ones I wrote. But when you actually contextualize what they said, or visualize what they said in that contextual capability, you begin to realize, oh, I can do this, I can do that, etc. One of the things they actually showed us, which was really quite fun, was the writing feature in a email, because you could write the email, and then in a little box on the side, it says, it gives you a thing. Should this be more professional, conversational, humorous, etc.? It gave you all of these other options that you hit that button, and what you wrote, it actually keeps your first one there in case you need it, but underneath it, it writes the second version of it, even better. It said better. And my other point, if you read my column, you'll see a lot of those things. And if you go to especially some of the major tech sites who really go into the weeds, they list all kind of things you can do with it. So you just have to, again, and I do understand what Apple's trying to do in an amount of time. By the way, in the first half that you missed, it had nothing to do with AI. It was all around just what's new in iOS 18, Mac OS Sequoia, etc. And it talked a little bit about some of the AI features, but then there was a break, and then Tim came on the stage and said, let's talk about Apple Intelligence. And from that point on, you got into the AI stuff.
That's the part I caught. What I just to take one more second on this, the sense that a lot of us talk about that we can do a lot of the tasks that we did before. And when we talk about personalization and individualization and knowing us and knowing our life, that's fine. But what I'm always interested in is what new places is this taking us to, and especially for young people, which is my focus. What can, for example, one of the things that Apple enabled is you can be a videographer. One of the things that Apple enabled is that you can create new kinds of stories, or the memories, or the things like that. That you can become a more advanced person than you are. Not just that you can use this to figure out who you are and to do more things that you've already done faster, but you can become, because of these tools, a more advanced person. I think that's what they're producing, and I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Very good. I'm going to ask Ben Kaczynski to join us, because Ben has been very prolific, as usual, in chat. Ben, you're thinking about what you heard this week and in this discussion?
Yeah, I've just been certainly following along, and I think if you read through my comments, you'll get a stream of conscious reflection on comments that folks have made. I first of all think it was a marketing genius to use the Apple Intelligence moniker. It was marketing genius to mention ML only a few times, especially in the first half, and less so in the second half. And it was marketing genius to only mention artificial intelligence a little bit in there. If you can't overwhelm something, confound it. and confuse it. And so Apple has earned that new moniker. So just as metaverse turned into spatial computing, Apple has done a genius job of diverting the market discourse.
I might
there.
suggest
By the
that
way,
if
it's
I haven't
kind of
seen it
funny
yet, is that Apple, if they're going to make that an abbreviation, it should be capital A, little I, right? So that they can own that version of Apple Intelligence, all right, versus, the capital A, capital I for general artificial intelligence, because they own the little I, okay, as a descriptor. Okay.
Tim, you had
Thank you.
a comment?
Well, I was just gonna say that the humorous thing in the audience that I was talking about is by Apple Intelligence, if you just take the first two letters, it's AI.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
my
like,
point.
yeah,
That's my
and it was
point.
like,
I can't overwhelm the AI market, artificial intelligence and market expectation, but I can confuse it and confound it and intermix Apple intelligence into it. So it was a marketing genius to do that. It creates, it concludes the convergence of iOS and Mac OS. It'll be a part of that closing the door on that separation, and because it's already been happening on a trend. So I thought that was a very positive note from there as well. Imbuing in an embedded architecture makes sense. The personalization makes a lot of sense. I think that discussion was starting to happen. Mustafa at Microsoft and things like the Rabbit and others, failed or not, start to speak about personal agents and personal agency. It brings in the SLM structure, personal SLM, in concert with LLM enrichment and capability with the OpenAI. OpenAI had to do this. If not them, then Perplexity might have, and and others. So in some sense, it was a smart move on both their parts for doing that extension, and also asking permission to do so. So anyway, I put in a plethora of
yeah, it's good
comments and
stuff. Good
observations.
stuff, Ben. Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. And I have brought in the Zoom user.
Thank you, Kevin. Just one quick question for Tim, and that is, what about Elon Musk's comments upon the privacy aspect of what Apple is proposing? I mean, I don't have the depth of knowledge to even begin to understand what he said.
Rock,
I figured I'd
Nobody.
give-
Nobody can understand Elon, Bruce.
No, but what?
Well, that's a different question.
That's FUD.
Well, first of all, Elon doesn't hesitate to try to steal thunder from his competitors. And that was a knee-jerk comment that made absolutely no sense. But to be honest with you, go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, because what was the thing you saw about 6 hours later, Bruce? He dropped his suit against OpenAI.
Yeah, I saw that. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think my thought was he's getting better lawyers on his team.
Probably
It's a valuation issue.
But the real reason he made a comment at all, because he's pissed because he's doing his own version of ChatGPT. And OpenAI, by cutting this relationship, fundamentally suggests that he's not going to even have an option. Now, Tim Cook does not like Musk, and he just disagrees with so much of what Musk is about, and I mean, there's just not a relationship there. So whether he thinks he had a possibility of doing this with Apple in the future is kind of, an interesting thing to think about, but that would just not be a reality.
Yeah.
He was just mad that he didn't get the deal.
Well,
Correct.
Great. Thanks.
with that kind of language, right, he's not getting himself invited to the table. Suzanne, you put in a comment about availability of chips. Say more about your question and ask Tim and Mike.
Well, I was watching, it was a webinar and I'd have to grab my notes. It was about 3 or 4 months ago where they said that because of Apple's heavily invested in China with all of its devices and chips, that there was going to be a chip, if you know, chip shortage, so you might as well buy two, right? And then when I went in to upgrade my phone at the time, it was actually that was in January of last year, and I got an Apple 14, and the manager there said the exact same thing. So I was like, she's like, yeah, there will be a gap where you're not going to be able to get your phone fixed. It'll be more of a challenge. So what do you think about that?
Well, well, I don't know what she was talking about.
Yeah, me either.
I'd say that's a good talking point for the sales team. Was that an Apple store or an AT&T store?
It was AT&T store.
Sounds good. That's a good incentive, right?
Apple, first of all, it has more to do with what phones Apple continues to support. And
Yeah.
right now it's from 12 up. So
Okay.
14 would not be an issue. The problem, though, is that for all these new features Apple introduced, the 14 will not have them.
Right.
Okay.
It
So
doesn't have-
Tim, at what point do you recommend to just to upgrade Apple? Do you think I should wait till the fall?
Oh, well, first of all, it doesn't. The next one, which is 16, doesn't come out until probably September, the fall.
Right.
Oh,
And
okay.
again, that's a cost issue. The one that's on the market now, the iPhone 15 Pro, will be cheaper by the fall, and
Right.
it will run all the AI stuff.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
And I would,
But if you were looking at a needing to actually fully upgrade, the 16 will be better because it's going to have an even faster neural processor.
right.
It's going to probably have the M4 instead of the M2 in it.
Okay.
Right.
So you'll even have more processing speed at the CPU level. And it's going to have a new screen.
Right.
16 is going to have a new screen that's going to be even sharper than what you have in the
Very,
15.
very cool. Hey, Tim, too, and Kevin, remember the call that we had with the gentleman from Microsoft where there wasn't the ability? I had asked the question about the back propagation, about being able to collect your previous data on your hard drives, you know, for it to be able to you know, implement its AI, remember? And then, so this seems like a tremendous Apple advantage, that it could it could go back to the past and reach
Well,
back.
that's what makes it so unique.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, the AI PC will start recording your life once
Right.
you start using it, but it can't go backwards.
Right.
And that's a real problem for a lot of people. Again, 3 years from now, it's not going to be a big deal, but for the first 2 years, you know, I mean, you're basically flying blind
Yeah.
in the sense of it contextualizing anything from your past.
Yeah.
And actually,
Hey,
I would
Will-
say as a value shopper, Suzanne, I might start looking at the Apple refurb site somewhere around August.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
you'll start seeing refurbed iPhone 15s, which, as Tim said, they'll give you most of the functionality you want.
But it's got to be a Pro.
It's got, yes, exactly. The biggest one, the
Not-
Pro.
Right. It can't be just a standard i15. It's got to have at least, it's got to
Right.
be either the Pro or the Pro Max are the
Yeah.
only ones.
Oh, I don't have a problem buying a brand new one just because,
Oh,
you
no,
know, your whole,
But you
your
may
whole
know
life.
people. I
Right.
always buy 6 months behind.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well,
Thank
the
you,
only
guys.
thing, again, the only thing the 16, I will say that 16 is going to have even greater processing power, and the neural processor is going to be more tuned to the new AI stuff. But again, 15 Pros and up are going to work just as well as will M1s on the iPad.
Yeah, need a new iPad, need a new PC, a new Apple big guy. Thank you.
We're at the top of the hour and,
Awesome.
we still have some questions, so I need to ask, our guest, Tim, can you stay for a few?
Yeah,
extra
I
minutes?
got a few more minutes, sure.
So I'm going to, put, our additional folks up. Oops.
I've got a quick question if I have time to ask
Go
it
ahead.
right. This is Mark. And the one thing that they didn't talk about very much, or maybe not at all, was languages and translation, and how that's how that's becoming more real time and more integrated. Did they talk about that any in private? I mean,
This version of AI launches only in English. The translation features that already exist can be applied. So
Right.
for example, if you wrote a letter or a note, or someone sent you something in French or Spanish, it can still translate that. But this version of AI inferencing around personal information is English only today.
Right.
They said that they will move it to other languages over time, but they didn't give us a time
Right. Okay. And an additional question. Okay, go. You're off mute, Zoom user.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin, that, I had my hand up, but that was for the previous question, so I'm
Well,
good.
then
Thank you, Tim.
we're gonna take you down. Before we conclude, Richard Boyd, if you would join us again for a moment. You've been talking for a while about simulation century, which is a durable thematic for you. How does what was discussed earlier this week and in this call, how does it relate to your thinking about how we can proceed forward with confidence? And then I'm going to ask Tim and Mike to wrap up today.
Yeah, so generally speaking, I posted an article in, I think, LinkedIn about it with my sort of knee-jerk reaction to Apple's announcements, and Tim, after reading your Forbes article. But yeah, in general, as I talk to friends of mine like Ben Gertzel and others about how this AI evolution is going to continue, I'm sort of eager, like I've said, I think in chat there, to go beyond just talking to data on the internet, which is generalized, so I think the idea of talking to data that's meaningful to me, that's in context, that's part of my business or it's my personal data, I think or that's specific to the environment I'm in. If I'm walking down the street in New York and I have a system that can tell me that, if I continue on this route, I've got a 12.5% chance of encountering an aggressive panhandler. But if I walk over one street, it goes down to 4. I find things like that really useful in improving my daily life. But I've described sort of 6 stages to how I see this adoption happening. The first is, being able to talk to data with chat. That's a great interface. AI is the new UI. We've been talking about that, or David Weinberger has for a very long time. The next stage is content creation. So now we can create content effortlessly. And I still don't know if that's good or bad, because we're losing some muscle, I think, in that, we can so easily create things, we don't think about it as much anymore. And then the next is more efficient work. Process automation has been going for a while, so now we're at stage 3. But I think the real high value things are in the last 3 stages, which is prediction, the ability to look into the future and predict the second, third, and fourth order consequences of some action we're taking, especially in government. And that's where I start talking about the simulation century, Kevin. As you know, I'm really thinking about this political climate we're in now. I'd really like the debates to be about, hey, here's my simulation with my AI and my models and my data. Where's yours? Like, my opponent's trying to create this kind of world. I'm trying to create this one. Which one are you going to vote for? And the conversations about data and models, not about personalities or feelings and all those things.
Well,
but
becomes your
then
more of the
last 2, if
platform.
I could, yeah, is the idea of improving judgment. Daniel Kahneman, I think it was in, I can't remember which book it was, we said every organization should be taking 1% of their funds and applying it to improving judgment. That's where I still, people are trying to do that with large language models, but I think they're sort of not entirely well suited to that if they don't have information specific or contextualized around the practice of architecture or motorcycle maintenance or whatever, or oncology or whatever your practice is, your business rules. So I think that's a hybrid system of old AI with these generative AI systems that's going to give us a new capacity or capability that is going to get us to the final one, which is, I think the highest moral purpose is, let's design the future we want and enlist these systems in the service of creating that future state that we want, which is a healthy community where there is no cancer and we're a multiplanetary species and whatever else, whatever other goals you have. Anyway, that's my mini TED talk.
Thank you, Richard. Greatly appreciate those thoughts. I knew that those would be helpful because you've been thinking about it for some time now. So,
Richard, this is
Tim?
Mark. Let's talk on judgment.
Yes, sir. I've been sending a note.
All right.
Okay.
Looking forward to that conversation.
So, Tim, Mike, all right, let's put a bow around this. What are the top three things that we should be taking away? And maybe number three should be, what action would you recommend, right? We take as individuals or as businesses, your choice. Tim, you first.
Well, one thing for all of us, the role of the neural processor is very important. I think I sent a link to our
Yep.
in last week or so to the NPU report that we did that explains the significance and the roadmaps for NPUs. But these neural processors is what makes this capable. And I can't emphasize how that integration of the CPU, GPU, and neural process has enabled this across the board. And so one, you need to keep an eye on what's going on in the future of neural processors. Two, I would encourage you to, again, not if you're an Apple user anyway, wait about a month and then update your do the iOS 18 beta as well as the iPad iOS beta, and you'll start seeing you'll start seeing the interaction between it. As one who writes a lot, I really like the new AI features for writers. I mean, we did a test one with one where, I converted something from business to more personal. The difference in tone makes a big difference when you write. And then third, I would actually suggest, if you can afford it, go to the iPhone 16 when it comes out. It will make these features pop. Plus that new screen the new OLED screen that they're going to use is a game changer.
Okay.
Right.
Mike.
My first thought is you are now going to be able to spend less time pulling your phone out, looking at your screen. Voice commands are now possible. I would say, as a user, if you got many of you have iOS devices, you can look now at whatever it is, Tim, it's 17.5.10, something like that, the most current version. Some of the enhancements to Siri, they're not the full ones you'll get with the neural processor enabled platforms. Is actually, so I'm going to be doing this like a benchmark. Okay, this was my last version of i17, which is pretty good with Siri. Now look, you can see as you get it integrated in there, it's going to be fairly interesting too. We're now a world of whispering and gesturing, which was kind of what I was alluding to in a presentation I did, becomes possible, right? We now have the potential of a real intelligent personal assistant. I think the privacy issue, the way at least so far as Apple's described it, does put that back again as part of a key brand value for Apple that will distinguish it from everybody else going forward. I think the content things with, in particular, like Tim, I write a lot and grew up writing for a living. I don't see this as a way to, kick back on the beach. I think this is about refinement, because one of the things you learn, right? Tim and I grew up with this, and Rob used to make me, O'Regan used to make me do it all the time. Take another stab at that, revise that again, right? And you're not with no more specific instruction than that. That's kind of what a lot of us grew up with who write for a living or grew up doing that. This ability now is to be able to point, Tim says, that's not quite my voice. I don't think they really showed this, but I'm going to bet one of the first things you'll be able to do with the new systems is you'll be able to train. It's already pre-trained as it goes through your data. You'll be able to literally do, and I put this down as a test for me, business mic, spicy mic, right? You're going to be able to build your own template of to not just let Apple. You're going to be able to build that to say this is the mic that only my family and a couple of people in the Content Evolution Federation get access to, and here's Mike for everybody else. And that's whether that's good or bad, I'm not sure, but it's going to be capable. As I said, I don't think these features are now I can just sit back on the beach and not do anything. I think it actually makes people more aggressive, going to be more aggressive and prolific creators. Some of that will be a lot of weird, crappy stuff in the beginning because everybody wants to try all the new features. But as people get used to this and users get used to it, I think it's actually going to be better writing, more personalized writing, and creative projects, etc. Because let's face it, every time you've used Apple Photo to design a slideshow, everybody's transitions start to look the same. When you watch the slideshow, it's like everybody's using the same music, etc. This is a level of creativity, I think, that's going to be pretty interesting and fun. I think remains to be seen whether Apple can deliver on the full promises of a fully secure system. That's, I think a reasonable concern for most people. On the other hand, I think, as I've watched them for a long time, almost as long as Tim, they tend to have already gone down, into the fourth dimension or four level chess as far as this is going to look like 2 years from now, as opposed to, 3 years from now. So it's a pretty compelling story. And I think for me, Tim, this is now that Apple is still there, right? Who can come up and, redefine a category, perhaps, as like Ben alluded to, and deliver something that stops everybody in their tracks, and the rest of the market just has to react to. There's not going to be a lot of alternative views on this once this gets out there.
Hey, Kevin, one last thing I want to bring up.
Sure.
In the first hour, they introduced one thing that everybody's going to love, and that's mirroring your iPhone on the screen. So instead of pulling your iPhone, a lot of times when I'm writing or doing something, I have to pull my iPhone out to look for other data that's just on the iPhone. The new Mac OS lets you actually take the exact iPhone image, put it your exact image, put it on the screen next to whatever you're writing, and you can use your iPhone as if it is your iPhone on the screen. You can go through and look at data, instructions, notes, things that aren't available on the Mac. That was everybody when the audience went bananas when they saw that feature.
And that one last one, Kevin,
can you do the
password
opposite?
manager.
Can you do the opposite and put your PC, you put your Mac screen on your phone?
No, just this particular feature is just putting the entire iPhone on the screen, and you can use it as if you were using the iPhone.
Okay. We're over time, so what you got the last word, Mike.
The new password manager capability in iOS 18. That's pretty killer, because I believe you'll be able to say once you get it, Siri, at the end of every Friday night, change all my passwords on everything. And you could be able to do that daily, weekly, whatever you want to do. And it'll propagate across everything you have that has a password on it. I think that's going to be.
Mike,
all right. So
can I add one thing?
We're at the end of our time. Come on.
I'm looking for the feature that whenever you say something or write something, Mike, I can get it read to me in Family, Mike.
no reason that can't happen when it comes out.
I know.
So thanks for everyone for joining today. Greatly appreciate it. Robust discussion. And Tim, Mike, thanks for leading it. You're both immersed in this. Tim, your level of because of your background with Apple, you're almost like the CIA. All was told, but nothing revealed. Right. So thanks for sharing with us today. And we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Take
Everything
care.
you do, be intentional. Cheers.
Yeah.